There are things the universe doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. While the world outside gets lost in noise, opinions, and urgent distractions, the universe whispers, and only those who have learned to listen to silence can understand what it says. We live surrounded by sounds, notifications, voices, promises, alerts, all competing for a piece of our attention. And even when the body rests, the mind remains restless, spinning like a wheel that doesn't know how to stop. Yet, amidst this invisible whirlwind, there is a subtler frequency, so delicate that it can only be felt when everything else quiets down. It is there that the true calling resides. Have you ever felt, at some point, that something was trying to speak to you not in words, but in sensations? Perhaps in a shiver that came out of nowhere, a coincidence impossible to ignore, or in that instant when time seemed to stop. These are the moments when the universe doesn't shout. It touches, and in that silent touch, there's more truth than in 1,000 speeches. But almost no one listens, because almost no one can endure silence. From an early age, we are trained to speak, to share, to explain. We are taught that everything must be shown, validated, published. But there's a kind of wisdom that is lost when it is displayed, a kind of power that evaporates when translated into words. The universe knows this. That is why it speaks so softly. There is immense beauty in not saying everything. In keeping certain discoveries, like one protects a flame from the wind. When you begin to awaken spiritually, a new perception lights up within you, and with it comes a temptation to tell the world what you see, what you feel, what you are finally understanding. But this is where many get lost. Because some truths were never meant to be explained, they were meant to be lived. The universe does not operate for show, but in resonance. It does not need to prove its presence, it simply is. And the more you try to prove, justify, or convince someone of what you feel, the further you move from a vibration that revealed it to you in the first place. It is not punishment. It is law. Truth cannot withstand premature exposure. It flourishes in darkness, like seeds that germinate before touching the light. Imagine a flower that blooms too early, forced by the impatient touch of someone who does not understand its timing. It may show its petals, but it loses the strength to grow. This is what happens with the revelations of the soul. When they are exposed before they are ready, they wither. That is why the universe whispers, because it knows that mystery is part of the miracle. Many search for grand signals of flash in the sky, a heavenly voice, an event impossible to ignore. But true signs are subtle. They appear in the curve of a thought, in the silence between two heartbeats, in the gaze of someone who recognizes you without saying a word. And if you haven't learned to listen to the whisper, you will spend your entire life waiting for a shout that will never come. The secret of the universe is that it is always speaking to you, but rarely in obvious ways. The problem is that most people only believe what makes noise. They want quick answers, clear promises, loud solutions. But spiritual truth does not work like that. It moves like wind over water, invisible, yet impossible to deny. And the quieter it is, the more powerful it becomes. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is concentrated presence. It is the space where answers finally arrive. The universe speaks through what you feel, not through what you hear. It guides you with subtleties, the intuition that arises from nowhere, the persistent premonition, the returning dream. These are your whispers, small fragments of eternity, trying to pierce through the noise of the modern world. But to hear the whisper, you must first learn to quiet yourself inside. It is not just about silencing the external voice, but the internal one, the one that judges, compares, questions, fears. The universe does not compete with the ego. It waits. And when you finally tire of seeking outside and decide to rest within, that is when the first whisper becomes audible. It does not arrive with explosions or promises. It comes with a soft certainty, almost imperceptible, yet it changes everything. It is the certainty of being on the right path, even without knowing the destination. Some call this intuition, others inner guidance or the voice of the soul. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that when it speaks, nothing else feels true. And the more you trust that space, the more the universe trusts you with revelation. But it only reveals what can be kept with wisdom. For knowledge without silence becomes noise, and noise destroys the sacred. That is why there are moments when the universe seems silent. You ask for signs, seek answers, and nothing happens. But silence is also an answer. It is the space between what you want and what you are ready to hear. If the universe shouted all truths at once, you could not bear the sound. So it whispers. And each whisper is an invitation. Pause, breathe, listen. Something is being said, even without words. If you've made it this far, perhaps you've already felt this inexplicable peace amidst chaos, the sense that there is an invisible order, a silent purpose guiding everything. It is no coincidence. It is synchronicity. And when you start recognizing the pattern behind events, the universe changes its language. It begins to communicate through life itself. Nothing is random. Every glance, every encounter, every loss becomes a sentence within a larger dialogue. A dialogue only the silent heart understands. There comes a moment in spiritual awakening when you realize that the whole world speaks, but almost no one listens. And that is precisely why the universe chooses to whisper. Not because it wants to hide anything from you, but because it wants to teach you to truly listen. Shouts deafen, but whispers awaken. They demand presence, they demand that you pause, breathe, and feel. For only in silence can truth be fully born. When external sound ceases and the mind's noise calms, something begins to stir from within, a kind of wisdom not learned, but remembered. It is as if an ancient voice, older than time itself, rises inside you, saying you have always known. And this phrase echoes strangely, because part of you recognizes it as truth, while another part struggles to deny it. This is a turning point when you understand that awakening is not about learning more, but about unlearning the excess. The universe does not whisper to confuse you. It whispers to return you to yourself. When you get lost in theories, dogmas, certainties, and explanations, the whisper drifts away. But when you let go, when you surrender, it returns pure, clear, effortless. Wisdom does not come from the noise of the mind, but from the stillness of the soul. That is why so many masters from countless traditions speak of solitude, retreat, meditation, not as escape from the world, but as a return to the essential. It is in this silence that you discover you need not prove anything to anyone. And it is here, in this state of surrender, that the universe begins to reveal what could never be taught with words. But there is a paradox. The more you discover, the less you can explain. How do you translate infinity into words? How do you fit mystery into a human form? The temptation to share is strong, especially when the soul is illuminated from within. You want others to feel the same, to understand, to see. But when you try to describe the indescribable, it dissolves. It is like trying to hold light in your hands. The harder you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. That is why the ancient sages smiled in silence. They knew that truth only blossoms when lived, not displayed. There is a silent strength in keeping what is sacred. It is not secrecy born of ego. It is protection born of love. Not every soul is ready to hear certain things. And if you give your light to eyes still living in shadow, they might try to extinguish it not out of malice, but out of fear. The fear of the unknown, the fear of the different, the fear of what they cannot yet understand. That is why the universe teaches you discernment. Not every revelation should be spoken. Not every vision should be shared. There are treasures that only flourish in the darkness of the heart. Have you noticed how certain experiences lose their magic when told aloud? That deep dream that felt like a message. That precise intuition that saved you from a mistake. That perfect coincidence that seemed impossible. When you try to explain it, the enchantment fades. Words are too small to contain mystery. And that is why the universe whispers, because the sacred only survives in silence. The human mind wants to control everything it wants to understand, define, name. But what comes from the spirit cannot be tamed. It reveals itself when you give up trying to comprehend and simply observe. And in that moment, something expands within you. It is not euphoria, not emotion. It is presence. It is as if a new way of seeing is born of vision that does not use the eyes, but consciousness. You begin to perceive patterns where before you saw only chance. You feel presences where before you saw only loneliness. And most importantly, you trust where before you doubted. This trust is not learned that it is remembered. It is the echo of the soul, saying you are exactly where you are meant to be. But trust also requires silence. If you seek confirmation at every step, if you share every intuition hoping for approval, you weaken the invisible thread that connects you to the whole. Because the universe does not respond to curiosity, it responds to faith. And faith is hearing the whisper without demanding it shout. This is where many stumble. They want visible signs, guarantees, applause. But the universe is not interested in spectacle. It wants intimacy. And intimacy only exists when there is secrecy. Think about it. What makes a deep relationship is not what is shown to the world, but what is shared in silence between two beings. It is the same with you and the universe. Every moment of connection is a secret dialogue, an encounter that does not need an audience. And the more you protect it, the more it grows. Because the sacred flourishes on protected ground. That is why, when the universe gives you something, an insight, a vision, an awakening, though not rush to tell. Breathe with it. Let it mature in silence. There are mysteries that need to be felt many times before they can be spoken once. And there are truths that will never be spoken because they were born only to be lived. When you begin to live this way, something changes. The people around you notice, even if you do not explain. You become calmer, lighter, more present. Your energy changes the environment. Not because you speak of spirituality, but because you have become spirituality in motion. And that is when the universe smiles, because the whisper has finally transformed into a living vibration. But remember, the ego will always try to turn the sacred into performance. It will want to show, prove, teach, be recognized. And if you give in, the mystery is gone. True spiritual greatness lies in remaining invisible when the ego wants to be seen. In keeping silent when the world demands explanations, in choosing presence over approval. Because the universe does not measure your progress by how much you talk about it, but by how well you can hear it. The whisper is both a call and a test, an invitation to go deeper into yourself, but also a measure of your spiritual maturity. If you can listen without needing to announce it, you have learned to hear. And when you truly listen, the universe entrusts you with more and more intuitions, more signs, more synchronicities. Not as rewards, but as reminders you are aligned. And when alignment happens, your whole life changes in tone. Days feel slower, coincidences more precise, pain shorter. Everything begins to hold a silent meaning, impossible to translate, yet undeniable. There comes a moment when silence ceases to be absence and becomes presence. You begin to realize that emptiness is not the lack of something, but the space for what is essential to appear. And then, for the first time, the world seems to breathe with you. Time slows down. The noises, once deafening, feel distant. The chaos around you still exists, but it no longer reaches you in the same way. You have not escaped the world, you have simply learned to walk within it. And in that instant, you understand the true meaning of the whisper. The universe never wanted to shout truths that you had always wanted to teach you to hear them. This is where the turning point happens. You realize that everything you were seeking outside was merely waiting for you to quiet yourself within. The answers were never hidden. They were drowned in the noise of your own thoughts. The wisdom that once seemed distant has always lived inside you, patiently waiting for the moment when silence becomes stronger than the need to understand. And when that moment arrives, everything changes. You feel that your entire life was trying to tell you something, but only now have you learned the language of silence. Your energy shifts. Your body shifts. Even the people around you begin to respond differently. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You seek less, but you find more. It is as if the frequency of your soul has finally aligned with that of the universe. And in this alignment, nothing needs to be forced. Everything simply happens. Synchronicity becomes a language of life. Every event, no matter how small, carries a secret meaning. It is a universe guiding you without needing words. But awakening also demands courage, because silence reveals truths that noise had hidden. Truths about yourself, about what you truly feel, about what you have been pretending not to see. And these revelations hurt. They dismantle identities, break illusions, strip the soul bare. You begin to see who you really are, not who the world said you should be. And in this process, there's a kind of death. The death of the character. the death of old versions of yourself that no longer serve you. Silence is not always peace, it is sometimes confrontation. But it is a confrontation that frees. Because after facing what is real, nothing can hold you back. This is the most intense point of the journey, a moment when you almost give up because the world's noise calls. Voices say return, speak, show, explain. But the universe holds you by the invisible hand of destiny, and whispers keep going. And even without fully understanding, you continue. Not out of certainty, but out of trust. Because something greater is guiding you and you feel it. No need to see it, no need to prove it. True faith is walking when a path has not yet revealed itself. Then silence, once frightening, becomes refuge. The same space that seemed empty now overflows with presence. You realize you were never alone, you were only too surrounded to feel the company of the invisible. And when everything finally quiets, something is revealed. The universe is not outside of you. It is the quietest part of your own being. Every intuition, is it calling you? Every coincidence, is it reminding you? Every deep silence, is it touching you? It is at this moment that the soul kneels, not in submission, but in gratitude. Gratitude for every noise that pushed you inward, for every confusion that taught you to distinguish what is real, for every loss that freed you from what no longer vibrated with you, and above all, for every whisper you finally learned to hear, because that is what transformed you. It was not the books, the teachers, or the external science that was listening, the silent listening to the invisible that had always been trying to speak to you. The power of silence is not in distancing yourself from the world, but in integrating it. You do not need to live isolated, nor hide from life. True silence happens even amidst noise. It is the calm center in the eye of storm. It is the pause between chaos and clarity. It is the space where the soul breathes while everything else spins around. And when you discover this point within yourself, nothing can unsettle you. Storms come, but you do not get lost in them. You watch them pass. You know that everything is movement, everything is passage, and what is eternal never makes noise. The universe is subtle. It does not need to prove anything, it simply is. And when you learn to vibrate at that same subtlety, life transforms into flow. You begin to realize that what you once called a miracle is simply the natural language of harmony. Everything happens at the right time, with invisible precision. And the most amazing part is that when you live in this state, others notice even if you do not say a single word. Energy speaks before voice. Presence communicates before speech. And silence becomes your greatest form of expression. There is something profoundly magnetic about someone who lives in peace. It is not charisma, it is frequency. People cannot explain it, but they feel drawn. It is the power of one who has learned to align with the rhythm of the universe. And that is what the whisper does. It turns you into a channel of calm, of wisdom, of presence. You become the whisper the universe uses to speak to others. No need to teach, no need to preach. Simply being is enough. Your vibration does the work. And this is the highest point of awakening when you become what you once sought. Perfido, acqui esta corde ultima part. Finalizando a tragicio completa, mantendo mesmo tam meditativo. Poetico y fluido, perfida par rotero de video. And then comes a moment when silence returns you to the world. But now, something is different. You are no longer the same person who began this journey. A new presence dwells within you, a calm that does not depend on circumstances, a certainty that requires no proof. What was once a search is now a finding. What was once doubt is now quiet understanding. The universe is no longer outside, observing you. It pulses within you, in every breath, every serene thought, every moment when the present becomes enough. You realize that life never wanted to punish you, nor to test you. It only wanted to teach you to listen. Because when the heart calms, the path appears. And when you trust, the universe moves. Not with haste, not with noise, but with perfection. Everything that seemed out of place begins to make sense, like pieces of a puzzle that only fit when you stop forcing them. Silence has not separated you from peaplight, has only taught you to approach in truth. You understand that not everyone will hear you, and that is okay, because the soul's most important messages do not need an audience. They only need presence. Now you walk differently. Your gaze carries depth. Your words are chosen with care, and time seems to flow in a new rhythm. You are no longer trying to prove anything, nor justify yourself, nor be understood. You simply are. And in this simplicity, power arises. This is where you understand the mystery that Alan Watts always sought to reveal. The greatest truths are not spoken, they are lived. There is no need to expose the invisible. The true sacred requires not explanation, but silence. Because every time you try to explain the inexplicable, it loses some of its force. But when you guard it, it flourishes within. It is like a flame protected from the wind. The more silence, the more it grows. And this is how you discover the ultimate secret. Silence is the temple where the universe speaks. It is the space between one thought and the next, between fear and surrender, between what was and what is yet to be. It is there that everything happens. And when you allow yourself to inhabit this temple, you realize that you were never separate from anything. All that is, has always been. All that is missing already exists within you. The world still makes noise, still shouts, still distracts. But you no longer need to participate in that clamor. You can observe from the outside with compassion. You can smile without explaining, help without announcing, love without needing to be seen. Because now you understand true power is not what impresses, it is what transforms. And transformation is born in silence. It is born when you stop seeking approval and begin to vibrate in authenticity. When you stop talking about spirituality and start living as someone awake. When you realize that every act, every glance, every gesture is a disguised prayer, you become a reflection of a universe itself, silent, yet infinite. Your presence heals, inspires, and uplifts effortlessly. People are drawn to you without knowing why. It is because silence speaks a language the heart understands. You are the sound the universe makes when it finally finds peace within a human being. And that is the greatest revolution that can exist. In a noisy world, being someone who lives in silence is an act of power. And this power, no one can take away. So, if at this very moment you feel something different, a shiver, a calm, an old memory, it is because this message did not come from me. It came from within you, from the place that always knew, but you had forgotten how to hear. The universe is calling you back home, not a home of walls, but a home of consciousness. And if you felt it, if this message resonated with something you cannot explain, then it was meant for you. Comment below if you felt it. Share this silence with someone who also needs to remember. And if you want to continue walking with me on this invisible path, subscribe, like, and stay tuned. There is much more the universe still wants to tell you. And remember, the purest truths do not need to be spoken. They only need to be lived in silence.